Getting started. Step 0. There is an unwritten step underlying all 12. Call it Step 0. We participated in the fellowship of the program. No one seems able to stay sober and progress in recovery without it, though some try. For most of us, without associating in some way with other recovering individuals, there is no lasting sobriety and none of the fringe benefits of recovery, growth, freedom, and joy. This holds true even for loners, those without groups. We don't try to explain this, it is simply a fact. We begin by meeting regularly with other members. If there is no group where we live, we start one ourselves, even if it is meeting with only one other member. Fellowship is that crucial to our recovery. We can't do it alone. We pray to be led to another sexaholic who will want to hear our story. Then we follow all leads that come to our attention. We contact the SA Central Office for any contacts there may be in our area and ask for materials and know-how. See Part 3 and Appendix 3. Many groups have started in just such a manner. Long distances may separate members at first. Some travel more than 100 miles to meet with others. Appendix 3, Part 3. All new and existing SA groups are urged to list themselves with the SA Central Office so inquirers in their areas may be referred to contacts. Contact the Central Office listed below and provide names and phone numbers of one or more contacts for your group. This also makes it possible for the Central Office to send news of matters affecting SA as a whole, which should be made available to all members. For more information about SA, write to SA P.O. Box 3565, Brentwood, Tennessee 37024-3565. Phone number 615-370-6062. Fax number 615-370-0882. Email saico@sa.org. All SA literature may be ordered from the SA website at www.sa.org. Commit yourself to your group. Whether it is being formed or is operating but still small, attend every meeting on time. This ensures maximum benefit to you and the group, which cannot have continuity without regular participants. The measure of such commitment will be the measure of your recovery. We also use telephone meetings with 2 or more members, using the 3-way calling feature available in many cities. Some members subscribe to discount long-distance phone services for considerable savings. Speakerphones enable a loaner to sit in remotely. We augment this by letter writing and attending other types of 12-step meetings, many of which are open to the public. Much benefit can be gained there in learning how to apply the steps in one's life and seeing how meetings are run. We cannot put this strongly enough. Experience has shown us that we must be part of others or we cannot maintain effective surrender, see ourselves rightly, or work the steps. Without regular participation in the fellowship, there seems to be no recovery. We stop. We stop practicing our compulsion in all its forms. We can't be sober in one area while acting out in another. There can be no relief from the obsession of lust while still practicing the acts of lust in any form. I can be masturbating to the image of a blank wall, and I'm still resorting to my drug. We stop feeding lust. We get rid of all of the materials and other triggers under our control. We stop feeding lust through the eyes, the fantasy, and the memory. We stop relishing the language of lust, resentment, and rage. We stop living only and always inside our own heads. One of the fringe benefits of going to a lot of meetings is that it gets us out of ourselves. As we become aware of other addictions that are part of our lives, we pray for willingness to surrender each one. There can be no true recovery from addiction if we allow it to persist in any area, whether in our thinking or in our acting out. What we are really saying when we start meeting with others is, I have to stop, please help me. But we need some demonstration of trust, and hearing the stories of other members, we begin to let our guard down. Before we know it, we've crossed that line of doubt, mistrust, and fear, and have put down our drug. The program doesn't tell us how to stop. We had done that 1,001 times. It shows us how to keep from starting again. We had it backwards. Before, we always wanted the therapist, spouse, or God to do the stopping for us, to fix us. Now we stop, and then in our surrender, the power of God becomes effective in us. We get involved. At first, all that many of us could do was simply attend meetings. Forget the steps, forget everything, just bring the body, we were told. And bring the body we did, even if we had to drag it along, and even if the mind and will lagged far behind. But soon we started sharing at the meetings, telling our story, bringing the inside out. And we discovered that the way to feel better is not only going to meetings, but taking the risk of self-disclosure. Inside my head, those problems seemed so hopeless. Just bringing them out into the light cut them down to size. We followed the suggestion of getting involved in the mechanics of meetings, helping set up, cleaning up, maintaining the literature, and being there for newcomers. Involvement made us feel we were part of, quite a difference from the empty, lifeless feeling of being apart from. Doing things, anything, got me out of myself and into the real world. It was from such simple beginnings that we could later feel more comfortable in meeting other members one-to-one and in going out after meetings. We began the painful but welcome process of growing up by coming out of ourselves. The Fellowship of Sobriety is where the action is, where the magic is, where the feeling of identification is, where the real connection is. We received or asked for the phone number of one or more members we could call or contact regularly. This seemed strange and unnatural to many of us, until we discovered that was how many others got help to stay sober at first. Suddenly, I was worthwhile. As sick as I was, what dignity there is in that total acceptance. The first test, surrender. Joining a group doesn't automatically make the problem vanish. Most of us had tried stopping countless times. The problem was we couldn't stay stopped. We had never surrendered. So the first time the craving hits again, when we get that urge for a fix, we give it up, even though it feels like we'll die without it. And at times, in our new frame of mind, the craving may seem stronger than ever, but we don't fight it like we used to. That was always a losing battle, giving it more strength to fight back. Neither do we feed or give in to it. We surrender. We win by giving up, each time. Coming off our habit can be confusing. My head turns automatically. I can't help feeding it. I don't have any choice. But we always fed our habit. We simply weren't aware of it. So whenever this happens, we simply acknowledge our powerlessness. Instead of either fighting or indulging, we surrender. We pick up the phone, we ask for help, we go to a meeting. We even admit we may not fully want victory over lust. Most of us don't have pure motives in wanting to get sober. Recovery is a slow process. The first time we walk through the stress of withdrawal without resorting to the drug, we discover that we don't die without that fix. Instead, we feel better, stronger, that maybe there's hope. We talk about the temptation in a phone call or at the next meeting and tell all. Telling the deep truth in an attitude of surrender helps break the power the memory of the incident holds over us. And if we're hit with lust again, we keep coming back and talking it out, regardless of how shameful and defeated we feel. We've all been there. We know how it feels. We also know the release and joy that surrender brings as we come back into the light. Usually we find that our initial surrender was incomplete, and we begin to see some loose ends. We discover some rain checks secretly stashed against future need, like alcoholics hiding their bottles. It's her key. I can't throw that away. I'll keep his phone number. I may be able to help him sometime. I'll get rid of the magazines later. In recovery, we simply throw stuff away. No one has to tell us. We just know. We always knew. We just never had the power to let them go. The next test, and the next. Sooner or later, the urge strikes again, sometimes out of nowhere, like a tidal wave crashing over us. Wham! Maybe it's the first time we feel rejected. Any of countless triggers can do it. It really doesn't matter what they are. We all have them. It's too overpowering. No one will know the difference. A look never killed anyone. Everyone's doing it. I never thought I'd hear from him again. Now what do I do? Often begins in the privacy of our innermost thoughts, when we're alone, when we're living inside our own head and the emotions we could never face overwhelm us. So what do? Naturally, we want to reach for the drug again. That's what we programmed ourselves to do. Instead, we surrender. Again, just like the first time, and the cry for help goes up again. I am powerless. Please help me. And we take action of getting out of ourselves and making contact with another member as soon as possible. The closer to the heat of the action, the better. We use the phone. We make the call, not because we want to, because we don't want to. We call because we know we have to. Our survival instinct comes to life. and we go to a meeting as soon as possible. When we first come into the program, this cry for help is in effect a shotgun working of steps 1, 2, and 3, surrender of whatever sort. That's all it takes, and not one of us does it with all the right motives. When the craving hits again, we repeat the surrender at the very point of our terror, in the pit of our hell, for that's where the mission of powerlessness really works, when we're in the raw heat of temptation and craving. Again, it's the change of attitude that brings relief. Instead of, I've got to have it or I'll die, our attitude becomes, I give up. I'm willing not to have it, even if I do die. And we don't die. We get reprieve, again, for seconds, minutes, hours, perhaps even days and weeks. The tidal wave is spent. The craving passes, and we're okay. We are learning the truth of the program maxim, one day at a time. But there will be another wave behind it, and sooner or later we get hit again. This may knock us off balance. Why do I always feel recovered after each bout, and then you get caught off guard by the next wave? Often seeing we've stopped acting out our habit for a time, we feel we're free of it forever. This may just be the time it strikes again. So the realization slowly dawns that we may always be subject to temptation and powerless over lust. We come to see that it's all right to be tempted and feel absolutely powerless over it as long as we can get power to overcome. The fear of our vulnerability gradually diminishes as we stay sober and work the steps. We can look forward to the time when the obsession, not temptations, will be gone. We begin to see that there's no power over the craving in advance. We have to work this as it happens each time. Therefore, each temptation, every time we want to give in to lust or any other negative emotion, is a gift toward recovery, healing, and freedom. Another opportunity to change our attitude and find union with God. We didn't get here in a day. It took practice to burn the addictive process into our being. It takes practice to make our true connection. Reprieve. At the first sign of relief from the obsession, we may get complacent. Once we've learned to live without the most obvious stuff, we may sit back and relax, take it easy. It's like the switch just turned off. Sobriety's a snap. There's nothing to it. We may feel as though the obsession was really something foreign to us, pulled out like a thorn from a finger, that we can remain unchanged, with the same attitudes and thinking as before. I'll just get out of here and go see that movie. I can always close my eyes on the bad scenes. Like it or not, that's the way many of us seem to do it. By degrees, instead of running jealously to heaven, we seem to back away from our hell, one step at a time. Thus, often shying away from full slips, some of us think we can allow ourselves partial slips, enjoying the temporary relief they bring. Testing our limits, we have all sorts of strategies for denial. We may start looking around, just free enough of the compulsion to start noticing what's out there again. And we see that everyone seems to be doing what we can no longer get away with. We feel the pull of it inside. How can anything that looks and feels that good be so bad for me? A sadness may come over us. We may find it hard to go to sleep. We may get fidgety, feel at a loss, feel empty, not knowing what's wrong. The old inner panic hits again, and we reach for our drug. That's when we get into action again. The pain, not to mention the fear of falling, jolts us into reality. We go to a meeting, get on the phone, contact someone we trust. We get out of ourselves and get moving. If I stay inside my head now, I'm dead. Again, we acknowledge that we are powerless over the obsession. Only now we may add a little more to our cry of desperation. Please help me. Thy will, not mine, be done. And another breath of relief and comfort comes. Reprieve again, respite. Even though we may be lulled into complacency again, this is a moment of inner peace, the likes of which we never knew before. We can be deceived because we may have surrendered on a full stomach. We just finished a destructive bout of sworn off, never again, and we meant it. Didn't we always? But the very next time we have the urge and the wave breaks over us again, knocking us off our feet, we don't act out our habit. We don't resort to our drug. 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time, and the craving passes. Surrender is a constant thing. Practice, day by day, hour by hour. Put it to practice so often it becomes habitual. That's how we get the attitude change that lets the grace of God enter to expel the obsession. We get a glimpse of ourselves. Perhaps we weather the first several waves of lust or temptation and withdrawal and then think we have it under control. Maybe we take a look in the mirror. Meetings and contact with other members have a way of helping us see ourselves. We start getting insights into what the habit has been doing to us, to our bodies, emotions, ability to function, will to live, families, jobs, money, time. We begin seeing things inside us that we had been using the drug to cover over. Why can't I let go of this terrible resentment? How could I have put my wife through that agony again? As dim outlines of our sick patterns emerge, we continue changing our attitudes. We start looking at ourselves. For the first time, the truth dawns on us. Every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. If somebody hurt us and we are sore, we are in the wrong also. 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, page 90. We also begin to detect some of our more subtle rationalizations. I'm in the neighborhood. I'll just go by and say hi. I'll call the old relationship and tell him I'm in the program. I'll just take a glance to see if it's something I shouldn't be looking at. We may even find ourselves cruising the old haunts or flirting, for no special reason, of course. Maybe I'll just be swept off my feet and overwhelmed, so I won't be responsible, we think. Such attitudes can persist in sobriety. Though we keep hearing half measures availed us nothing, we go through the phase where they seem to avail us something. Apparently we have to see this for ourselves at our own pace, even if we fall flat on our faces. Thus, in the flush of newfound sobriety and success, we can be setting ourselves up for a fall. Lust is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and very patient, but if we want recovery, we keep coming back. This may be the time many of us start thinking seriously about what the program is all about. We may have been surviving hit and miss on the first part of Step 1 and maybe bits and pieces of a few others, but we're not going anywhere. Maybe we've even slipped and are hurting and don't know what hit us or what to do about it. Confusion and puzzlement reign. I believe in the steps. What's wrong? Why isn't it working for me? We're sitting there, staring into space, and it dawns on our dullness. The steps won't work for me unless I work them. Up to this point, recovery may have been just as compulsive as the addiction. But there comes a time when this isn't enough. It's just too uncomfortable. We begin to see that the obsession and compulsive acting out are only symptoms of our underlying spiritual illness. Even the fellowship isn't enough. We have to get to the source of the problem ourselves. Instead of that subconscious and insidious attitude, please fix me, as though some other person or group could do the recovery for us, we take responsibility for our own recovery. We start working the steps. Getting an SA sponsor. As we get into the steps, we find it indispensable to rely for help on those who have gone this way before. In 12-step programs, the term commonly used is sponsor. What we call the person doesn't matter, and we don't have to call them anything. Asking for help and accepting suggestions are what bring results. Experienced members advise getting a temporary sponsor as soon as one is serious about recovery. Later, when we are better established in the fellowship, we can choose another. Withdrawal from our addiction may leave us in a state of emotional and spiritual shock that can persist for some time. Our sexaholism has so separated us from reality and others that we may appear to others as being not there. We cannot see the truth about ourselves because we are lost inside ourselves. And for some time we suffer from tunnel vision, nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, or all of them put together. Anything but normal vision. Some gentle or not so gentle holding up of the mirror and prodding are usually necessary, and above all, we need the example of a life that's making it. We take responsibility for our own recovery, but we don't remain isolated and in charge of it. We surrender to God and take direction from the sponsor. Thus, we go to meetings and start making our connection with people. Alone, we cannot make the transition to reality. Perfection in the sponsor is neither necessary nor possible. Taking the action of getting out of ourselves is what counts, even though this may not be what we feel like doing. The sponsor can help us conquer the delusion that we should only do what we feel like doing. Take the action, the sponsor says, and the feelings will follow. If you wait for the feeling first, it'll never happen. We discover that in-depth ego deflation is one of the keys to sobriety and growth. And asking for help often helps us achieve this. Asking for help is one way we start dismantling the wall of ego we've built so carefully around ourselves. In reaching out to another, we reach out to the undiscovered best in ourselves. This confirms our commitment to sobriety and is the beginning of that radical change of attitude from being the center of the universe. I wanted to stay in charge. That's why God and healing could never get to me. There are few absolute requirements a prospective sponsor should have, but a period of comfortable sexual sobriety, including progressive victory over lust, is surely a must. Another requirement is that he or she be ahead of us in working the steps. The norm is that men sponsor men and women sponsor women. We follow direction and make regular contact, meeting face-to-face when possible once a week or more, especially in the beginning. Some newcomers also find daily phone contact very helpful. The one who needs help does the calling. We gave up the old idea of being catered to. Having sponsors with our particular form of acting out doesn't seem to matter as much as having those who are incorporating the principles of the steps and traditions in their lives and who walk like they talk. Wise sponsors know they can't carry the sexaholic. They can only carry the message of their own recovery. Thus, they do not get involved in giving advice and bearing responsibility for the other person. Likewise, we do not become dependent on the sponsor in the way we were with parents, spouses, lovers, or even professionals. The goal of a good sponsor is the eventual independence and spiritual and emotional maturity of the individual, to help the person start walking the right path in the right direction. The wise sponsor will also let the person know that their relationship alone is not enough. The person is going to have to make his or her connection with the group and become part of. Typically, when we come into the program, all kinds of personal problems are uppermost in our mind. Pending separation or divorce, problems of romance, an occupational, health, legal, or money crisis. Most of us felt that if only the problems would go away, we would be okay. What we did not realize was that it is because of and within these very problems that the program works. The program doesn't work in a vacuum. It only works in the day-to-day ebb and flow of our lives. Trial, tribulation, and pain are the soil in which the steps can germinate, take root, and find fruition in our lives. Thus, every problem, no matter how small or great, every crisis, resentment, pain, illness, stress, conflict, depression, any and all of them, without exception, can be turned into good. Every time we feel overwhelmed, our sponsor can point the way out of self-pity, resentment, or fear and onto right thinking, helping us say, I thank God for the good and the seemingly bad as necessary for my growth. Thy will, not mine, be done. The value the sponsors receive, if they are where they should be, is the experience of working their own program in a way otherwise impossible. There's something that only working with others can give us. It is truly a gift, even if the one seeking help is ungrateful or doesn't stay sober. We help expecting nothing in return, and the measure we receive is the measure we've given of ourselves to another. First aid. Here's how two people helped each other stay sober when they had no group. I found one other member in a 12-step program who also wanted sexual sobriety. I was 49 and he was 21. He was single and I was married. I was a college graduate and he was a high school dropout. We had little in common, but we started calling each other almost daily. We would get current with our lust temptations, telling each other what we were going through to break the power and that experience or fantasy had over us. Then we also started getting current with our resentments. Lust and resentment thus began to evaporate as we brought them to the light, much as sunlight dispels a fog. I call it the daily double, getting rid of both daily. When temptation was especially intense, we'd pick up the phone and call right away. Sometimes we'd pray together. Giving up our lust and resentments to one another as they came up turned out to be a very effective form of surrender. What a marvelous freedom and joy it brought. And in the process, we were breaking out of that deadly isolation we had locked ourselves into. I look back on that time as one of the highlights of my entrance into the program. I was beginning to come to life.